My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm 31 years old. If you had asked me 6 months ago where I thought my life was heading, would have painted you a picture of suburban comfort. A modest 2-story house with a garden I actually tended to, a husband who kissed me goodbye every morning, and a future that felt as predictable as the seasons. I had been married to Daniel for 4 years, together for 7, and I genuinely believed we had built something unshakable. We weren't the couple that posted every moment online or made grand declarations of love at dinner parties. We were quiet, steady, the kind of love that didn't need constant validation. Or so I thought, until the night my phone lit up with a text that would unravel everything I believed about us. The message came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was already in bed, halfway through a mystery novel I'd been meaning to finish for months. Daniel was supposedly working late again, something that had become increasingly common over the past few weeks. His text was short, clinical, devastatingly simple. I'm not in love with you anymore. I think we both know this isn't working. I stared at those words until they blurred, reading them over and over as if repetition might change their meaning. My first instinct wasn't anger or tears. It was a strange, hollow numbness, like my body had decided to shut down before the pain could fully register. I set the phone on the nightstand, switched off the lamp, and lay in the darkness, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Somewhere in that silence, a thought crystallized with startling clarity. If this was how he chose to end things, then I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. When Daniel finally came home 2 hours later, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling. I heard his keys in the door, his footsteps on the stairs, the careful way he opened the bedroom door as if trying not to disturb me. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, and I could feel his eyes on me in the darkness, waiting for something. A confrontation, maybe. Tears. Begging. Instead, I kept my breathing steady, pretending to sleep, and eventually he retreated to the guest room. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, showered, dressed, and made myself a cup of coffee. When Daniel emerged, looking haggard and guilty, he found me sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through my phone with the kind of calm that clearly unsettled him. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough. I glanced up, took a sip of coffee, and replied with a tone so light it could have been discussing the weather. "About your text. I got it. Thanks for the update." His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, frustration, something that looked almost like disappointment. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I set my mug down and met his eyes. "What else is there to say, Daniel? You made your feelings clear. I'm just respecting your decision." He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I thought you'd want to talk about this. About us." "There is no us," I said simply. "You said so yourself." He stood there, frozen, as if I'd just rewritten a script he'd been rehearsing in his head. And that's when I realized something important. Daniel hadn't expected me to let him go. He'd expected me to fight, to plead, to give him the emotional drama that would justify whatever story he'd been telling himself. But I wasn't going to play that role. Not anymore. The days following that kitchen conversation felt surreal, like I was watching my life from behind glass. Daniel seemed genuinely thrown by my calm acceptance. He'd come home from work and linger in doorways, watching me cook dinner or fold laundry as if waiting for me to crack. But I didn't crack. I went to work, came home, handled my responsibilities, and treated him with the polite distance you'd give a roommate you barely knew. It was the not knowing that seemed to eat at him most. On Thursday evening, 3 days after his text, he cornered me in the living room. I was reading on the couch, a glass of wine within reach, the picture of contentment. He sat down on the opposite end, keeping that careful distance, and cleared his throat. "Elena, we really should discuss logistics. The house, finances, how we're going to handle this." I marked my page and looked at him. "Sure. What did you have in mind?" He blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. "Well, I was thinking maybe we could do a trial separation first. I could stay with my brother for a few weeks, give us both space to think." Space to think, I repeated slowly. Daniel, you texted me that you're not in love with me anymore. What exactly is there to think about? His jaw tightened. I just think we're both in shock. Maybe we shouldn't make any permanent decisions right away. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, bitter and sharp. You weren't in shock when you sent that text at midnight. You weren't asking for space to think. You were ending this. He ran his hands through his hair, frustration finally bleeding through. God, Elena, why are you being so cold about this? Don't you even care? I set my wine glass down carefully. Of course I care, Daniel. I cared for 7 years. But you don't get to drop a bomb and then act surprised when I don't beg you to stay. That's not cold. That's self-respect. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. Then he stood abruptly and walked out of the room. I heard his footsteps heavy on the stairs, heard the guest room door close with more force than necessary. I picked up my book again, but the words swam on the page. My hands were trembling now that he was gone. The truth was, I did care. I cared so much it felt like something vital had been carved out of my chest. But I also knew that showing him that pain would only give him power he didn't deserve. The next morning, I woke to find Daniel already gone. No note, no text, just an empty house that felt bigger and colder than it had the day before. I made myself breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, and ate standing at the counter. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend, Vanessa. Coffee today? I need to vent about my boss. I replied immediately. Absolutely. Noon at Crescent Cafe? Her response came fast. Perfect. You okay? You've been quiet. I'm fine, I typed back. Just dealing with some stuff. Tell you in person. When I met Vanessa at the cafe, she took one look at my face and knew. Her expression shifted from casual greeting to sharp concern. What happened? I told her everything. The text, Daniel's confusion when I didn't fight him, the strange limbo we were living in. Vanessa listened without interrupting, her coffee growing cold in her hands. When I finished, she leaned back and let out a long breath. So let me get this straight. He dumps you via text, and now he's upset that you're not falling apart? I nodded. Apparently, I'm being too cold about the whole thing. Vanessa's laugh was sharp. Elena, that man wanted you to chase him. He wanted the validation of watching you beg. The fact that you didn't is killing him. Her words settled over me like a revelation. Of course. Daniel hadn't fallen out of love. He'd wanted an exit that made him feel like the victim, the one who'd been forced to leave because I wasn't enough. But my calm acceptance had robbed him of that narrative. You know what this means, right? Vanessa continued, her eyes serious. He's going to try to get a reaction out of you. Men like that always do. They can't stand being the villain in their own story. I stirred my latte absently. What do you think he'll do? She shrugged. Could be anything. Suddenly wanting to work things out. Picking fights to make you look crazy. Or my personal favorite, introducing you to the real reason he's leaving. The real reason. I hadn't let myself think about that possibility, but now it's settled in my stomach like a stone. You think there's someone else? Vanessa's expression was sympathetic but honest. Sweetie, men don't send texts like that out of nowhere. Something triggered this. Whether it's another woman or just his own midlife crisis, I don't know. But people don't blow up stable marriages because they woke up one day and decided they weren't in love anymore. There's always something. I went home that afternoon with Vanessa's words echoing in my head. The house was still empty. I walked through the rooms we'd furnished together, noticing for the first time how many of Daniel's things had already disappeared. His favorite jacket wasn't on the coat rack. The shoes he always left by the door were gone. Half his books had vanished from the shelf. He'd been packing, slowly, quietly, while I'd been pretending everything was fine. The realization hit me harder than the original text. He hadn't just decided he wasn't in love with me. He'd been planning his exit for weeks, maybe months. I pulled out my phone and opened our text thread. The last message was still his. "I'm not in love with you anymore." Below it, the 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. He was typing. I waited, watching those dots dance, my heart pounding. Finally, the message came through. "Can we talk tonight? I need to explain some things." I stared at those words. Part of me wanted to say no, to let him sit in his uncertainty the way he'd left me sitting in mine. But another part of me, the part that still remembered 7 years of history, needed to hear what he had to say. Even if it hurt. Even if it confirmed every suspicion Vanessa had planted in my mind. I typed back. "I'll be home at 7. He responded immediately. "Thank you. That's all I'm asking." I set the phone down and looked around the living room. The couch where we'd watched countless movies. The bookshelf we'd assembled together, arguing over the instructions. The framed photo from our wedding, both of us grinning like we'd won the lottery. I walked over to that photo and picked it up. The girl in the white dress looked so certain, so blissfully unaware of what was coming. I wondered what I would tell her if I could. Would I warn her? Tell her to guard her heart more carefully? Or would I let her have those 7 years of happiness, even knowing how they'd end? When 7 o'clock came, I was ready. I'd changed into comfortable clothes, poured myself a glass of wine, and positioned myself in the armchair by the window. Not the couch. The couch felt too intimate, too much like the us we used to be. I heard Daniel's car in the driveway, heard his key in the lock. He came in looking nervous, his shirt wrinkled like he'd been wearing it all day. He saw me in the chair and hesitated. "Can I sit?" I gestured to the couch. He sat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped. For a long moment, he just looked at the floor. "I've been thinking a lot," he finally said. "About us, about everything. I've been unfair to you, and I know that." I waited. He took a breath. "The truth is, I've been feeling disconnected for a while. Not just from you, from everything. My job, my life, myself. I started questioning if this was really what I wanted, if I'd made the right choices. And instead of talking to you about it, I just let it build until I exploded." His words were careful, rehearsed. I could hear the therapy speak in them, the self-help book phrases. But there was something he wasn't saying. Something hovering just beneath the surface. "Daniel," I said quietly. "Is there someone else?" His head snapped up. "What?" "No. Elena, no, it's not like that." "Then what is it like?" "Because Vanessa's right. People don't blow up marriages because they're feeling disconnected. They talk to their spouse. They go to counseling. They don't send texts at midnight saying they're not in love anymore." He looked trapped, cornered. I could see him weighing his options, deciding how much truth to give me. "There's not someone else," he said slowly. "But there was someone." My chest tightened. "Was." He rubbed his face. "A few months ago, I started talking to someone at work. Laura. It was just friendly at first, but it became more emotional, not physical. We'd text during the day, grab lunch, talk about things I wasn't talking to you about. It made me realize how far apart we'd grown." "How did it end?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger building in my veins. "It didn't," he admitted. "Not really. She transferred to another office last month, and that's when everything hit me. I realized I'd been using her as an escape from dealing with our problems. And instead of fixing those problems, you decided to end things." He looked at me, and for the first time since this started, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. I panicked, "Elena. I thought if I just ripped the bandage off, it would be easier. For both of us." I stood up, setting my wine glass down with deliberate care. "You thought it would be easier to text me at midnight that you didn't love me any more than to actually be honest about what was happening. You thought it would be easier to let me believe I wasn't enough instead of admitting you'd been emotionally cheating for months. He stood too. I know. I know how it sounds. Then you know why I'm not going to beg you to stay, I said. Because you don't deserve that from me. You don't deserve my tears or my anger or my forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Daniel's face crumpled. Elena, please. I don't want to lose you. I just needed you to know the truth. The truth, I said, is that you already lost me. The moment you sent that text, you lost me. Everything after that is just details. I walked past him toward the stairs. I'm going to bed. You can sleep in the guest room, or you can go to your brother's, or you can go to a hotel. I don't care. But I'm done having this conversation tonight. He didn't follow me. I heard him sink back onto the couch, heard the soft sound that might have been a sob or just a heavy breath. I didn't turn around to check. In my bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, letting the facade finally crack. My hands shook. My breath came in gasps. But I didn't cry. Not yet. Because crying would mean accepting that this was real, that my marriage was truly over, that the man I'd loved had been somewhere else for months while I'd been home thinking everything was fine. Instead, I changed into pajamas, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled me under. Tomorrow, I would figure out what came next. Tomorrow, I would start building a life that didn't include Daniel. But tonight, I just needed to survive. The morning after Daniel's confession, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. For a disoriented moment, I thought maybe the past week had been a nightmare, that I'd wake up to find everything normal again. Then reality settled back over me like a heavy blanket, and I remembered. Laura. The emotional affair, the midnight text. I stayed in bed longer than necessary, listening to Daniel move around the kitchen, the clink of mugs, the soft padding of his feet on tile. He was still here. Part of me had hoped he'd leave during the night, spare us both the awkwardness of another morning pretending to be strangers who shared a house. When I finally went downstairs, I found him at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee poured. He'd made mine the way I liked it, cream and 1 sugar, a small gesture that felt both thoughtful and manipulative. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and hopeful. I made you coffee, he said, pushing the cup toward me. I took it without sitting down, leaning against the counter instead. Thank you. We stood in silence, the distance between us feeling like miles. Elena, I want to fix this, he said suddenly. I know I messed up, but I still love you. I think we can work through this if you're willing to try. I took a sip of coffee, buying myself time to think. The Daniel sitting in front of me looked broken, vulnerable, nothing like the man who'd sent that cold text 5 days ago. But I couldn't forget how quickly he'd shifted, how easily he'd been ready to walk away until I didn't give him the reaction he wanted. What does fixing this look like to you? I asked. He leaned forward eagerly. Counseling, maybe. I could cut off all contact with Laura completely. We could take a trip, reconnect, remember why we fell in love in the first place. His words sounded practiced, like he'd been up all night rehearsing them. Daniel, I said slowly, setting down my cup. You told me you weren't in love with me anymore. Those were your words. Now, less than a week later, you want to take a romantic trip and fall in love again? He flinched. I was confused. I was dealing with a lot of emotions I didn't understand. But last night, talking to you, being honest, it made me realize what I'd be losing. What you'd be losing, I corrected. Not what you already lost. There's a difference. His face hardened slightly, a flash of frustration breaking through the remorse. So you're just giving up? You're not even willing to try? I felt something shift inside me, a door closing that I hadn't even realized was still open. I'm not the one who gave up, Daniel. You did. You gave up months ago when you started confiding in Laura instead of me. You gave up when you sent that text instead of having an honest conversation. And now you want me to do the work of saving something you were ready to throw away. That's not fair. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Nothing about this is fair, Elena. I made a mistake. I'm human. Don't I deserve a second chance? Maybe you do, I said quietly. But not from me. Not right now. I need time to figure out what I want, and I can't do that with you hovering, trying to fix things because you're scared of being alone. His expression cycled through several emotions: hurt, anger, desperation. Fine, he said finally. I'll give you space. I'll stay at my brother's for a while. But I'm not giving up on us, Elena. I hope you know that. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He left an hour later with a duffel bag of clothes, and the house fell into a silence that felt both liberating and suffocating. The first few days alone were strange. I kept expecting to hear Daniel's footsteps, his voice, the familiar sounds of another person existing in my space. Instead, there was just me and the echo of my own movements. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, taking on extra projects, anything to avoid coming home to that empty house. My coworkers noticed but didn't pry. I was grateful for that. Vanessa checked in daily, sometimes with texts, sometimes showing up with takeout and wine, refusing to let me isolate completely. It was on day 4 of Daniel's absence that things started to shift. I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break when I saw it. Daniel had posted a photo on Instagram, a sunset view from what looked like a hiking trail, with a caption that made my stomach turn. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself again. Grateful for this journey. The comments were already rolling in. You've got this, man. Stay strong, brother. Proud of you for choosing growth. I stared at the post, feeling heat rise in my chest. He was crafting a narrative, painting himself as someone on a journey of self-discovery, conveniently leaving out the part where he'd emotionally cheated and tried to abandon his marriage via text message. I showed it to Vanessa that evening. She read it and snorted. Oh, he's doing the spiritual awakening thing. Classic. Let me guess, next he'll post something about toxic relationships and setting boundaries. I want to comment, I admitted. I want to call him out publicly for what he actually did. Vanessa shook her head firmly. Don't. That's what he wants. He wants you to look like the bitter ex, the one who can't let go. Your silence is more powerful than anything you could say. She was right, but it didn't make it any easier. Over the next week, Daniel's posts became more frequent. Inspirational quotes about finding your authentic self. Photos of him at the gym, captions about physical and emotional transformation. A check-in at a bookstore with a stack of self-help titles. Each post was carefully curated to show a man healing, growing, moving forward. Then came the post that made my hands shake. A photo of Daniel with a group of friends at a bar, everyone laughing, drinks raised. The caption read, "Surrounded by people who support my journey. Real ones know what's up. #new beginnings, #chosen family." I recognized some of the faces in the photo. Our friends. People we'd spent holidays with, gone on double dates with, invited to our wedding. And there they were, Team Daniel, celebrating his newfound freedom while I sat alone in a house that felt like a museum of our failed marriage. My phone started buzzing. First, a text from Daniel's sister, Monica. Hey Elena, I just wanted to reach out. I know things are hard right now. If you need to talk, I'm here. The message felt genuine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was gathering information, trying to figure out which side of the story to believe. I replied with something polite and non-committal. Thanks, Monica. I appreciate that. Just taking things one day at a time. Then came a message from Bethany, a mutual friend who'd been in that bar photo. Girl, are you okay? I heard about you and Daniel. I'm so sorry. Such a shock. I typed back. Did Daniel tell you what happened? Her response came quickly. He said you guys grew apart. That you both realized you wanted different things. The anger that had been simmering all week finally boiled over. I called her. Bethany picked up on the second ring. Elena, hey. I need you to know something, I said, my voice steady despite the fury coursing through me. Daniel didn't just decide we wanted different things. He had an emotional affair with someone at work for months. Then he texted me at midnight saying he wasn't in love with me anymore. He's rewriting history to make himself look better, and apparently it's working. There was a long silence on the other end. I didn't know, Bethany finally said. He made it sound so mutual, so amicable. Of course he did, I said. Because the truth makes him look bad. And Daniel can't stand looking bad. After I hung up, I felt both vindicated and exhausted. Vanessa had been right about not commenting publicly, but I wasn't going to let him control the narrative with everyone we knew. If people asked, I'd tell them the truth. Let them decide who to believe. The next day, Daniel texted me. We need to talk about the house. I think we should consider selling. My chest tightened. The house was the last tangible piece of our life together, and he wanted to liquidate it like a bad investment. I'm not ready to make that decision, I replied. Well, we can't just let it sit there, he shot back. I'm paying half the mortgage for a place I'm not even living in. You're the one who left, I reminded him. That was your choice. His response came fast, defensive. I left because you needed space. Don't twist this around. I stared at my phone, marveling at his ability to rewrite events that had happened less than 2 weeks ago. I wasn't going to engage. Instead, I called a lawyer. The consultation was eye-opening. The attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Chin, listened to my story without judgment and laid out my options. You're in a strong position, she told me. No kids, joint assets, and documentation of his infidelity, even if it was emotional. If you want to file for divorce, we can move quickly. The word divorce hung in the air between us. I'd been avoiding it, treating this as a separation, a rough patch, something that might still be fixable despite everything. But hearing it said out loud by someone who dealt with broken marriages every day made it real. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Part of me still thinks maybe we could work through this. Patricia's expression was kind but firm. Mrs. Martinez, in my experience, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Your husband told you he wasn't in love with you. He had an emotional affair. He's now trying to control the narrative and pressure you about shared assets. Those aren't the actions of someone who wants to rebuild. Those are the actions of someone protecting themselves. Her words settled over me like truth I'd been avoiding. I left her office with a stack of documents and a retainer agreement, unsigned but tucked carefully in my bag. Just in case. That night, alone in the house, I opened a bottle of wine and did something I'd been putting off. I went through Daniel's closet, the guest room where he'd been sleeping those last few days, looking for anything he'd left behind. In the nightstand drawer, I found a journal. I hesitated, knowing I was crossing a line, but curiosity and hurt won out. I opened it. The entries were sporadic, dating back 6 months. Most were mundane, work frustrations, gym goals, observations about daily life. Then I found an entry from 3 months ago. Had lunch with Laura again today. It's so easy to talk to her. She gets me in a way Elena hasn't in a long time. I don't know what that means, but I think about her more than I should. I flipped through more pages, finding more references to Laura. The way she laughed at his jokes. How she made him feel seen. How confused he was about his feelings. And then, an entry from 2 weeks before his midnight text. I think I need to end things with Elena. It's not fair to either of us. I'm not in love with her anymore. I keep waiting to feel something, but it's just empty. Maybe that's my answer. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This wasn't confusion or panic. He'd been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. And he'd still come home every night, kiss me goodbye every morning, let me believe we were okay while he was already gone. I texted Vanessa. I found his journal. She replied immediately. And? It's worse than I thought. He's been planning this for weeks. Her response was swift. I'm coming over. Don't make any decisions until I get there. But I'd already made my decision. Sitting there on the floor of the guest room, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage I'd been clinging to, I finally let go. Daniel wasn't confused. He wasn't having a crisis. He'd simply decided I wasn't enough, and instead of being honest, he'd let me live in ignorance while he figured out his exit strategy. That wasn't love. That wasn't even respect. That was cowardice. When Vanessa arrived, she found me still sitting on the guest room floor, the journal open in my lap. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me and wrapped her arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that for a long time, the silence saying everything words couldn't. Finally, she spoke. What do you need? I need to see him, I said. Face to face. I need him to know that I know. Vanessa pulled back, studying my face. Are you sure? Once you confront him with this, there's no going back. Good, I said. Because I don't want to go back. I texted Daniel that night. We need to meet. Tomorrow. The coffee shop on Maple Street. 1 o'clock. His reply came within minutes. Okay. Is everything all right? I didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him spend the night anxious and uncertain, the way I'd spent so many nights while he was texting Laura, while he was planning his escape, while he was pretending everything was fine. I barely slept. When morning came, I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made me feel powerful. A black blazer, fitted jeans, the leather boots Daniel had always said made me look intimidating. I wanted to look intimidating. I wanted him to see that I wasn't the woman he'd left in that house, waiting for him to decide if she was worth keeping. Vanessa offered to come with me, to sit at a nearby table as backup, but I declined. This was something I needed to do alone. When I walked into the coffee shop at exactly 1 o'clock, Daniel was already there. He'd chosen a corner booth, private but visible, and he stood when he saw me. He'd dressed up too, I noticed. Button-down shirt, clean-shaven, hair styled. He was nervous. Elena, he started, but I held up my hand. Let me talk first, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. You can respond when I'm done. He nodded, sinking back into his seat. I found your journal, I began, watching his face drain of color. I know you've been planning this for months. I know about every lunch with Laura, every thought you had about leaving me, every moment you spent checking out of our marriage while I was still all in. His mouth opened, closed. I violated your privacy, I continued. I know that. And I don't care. Because what you did was so much worse than me reading a journal you left in our house. You let me believe we were okay. You let me make plans for our future while you were already writing your exit in those pages. Elena, I didn't mean for you to find that, he said weakly. I know you didn't, I replied. Just like you didn't mean for me to find out about Laura until you were ready to tell me on your terms. Just like you didn't mean for me to see through your social media campaign, playing the victim, making yourself look like someone on a healing journey when really you're just running from accountability. His face flushed. That's not fair. You don't know what I've been going through. You're right, I said, leaning forward. I don't know what you've been going through. Because you never told me. You told Laura. You told your journal. You told everyone except the person you promised to share your life with. He looked down at his hands. I was scared. Scared of what? I asked. Scared of hurting me? Because you did that anyway. Scared of being honest? Because lies hurt worse. Scared of looking like the bad guy? Because that's exactly what you are. The words hung between us, sharp and final. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I love you, Elena. I know I screwed everything up, but I do love you. I don't think you know what love means, I said quietly. Love isn't just a feeling you have when things are easy. Love is choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. Love is being honest even when the truth is ugly. You didn't love me, Daniel. You loved the idea of me, the convenience of me, what I did for you. But you didn't love me enough to fight for us when things got complicated. So what now? He asked, his voice breaking. Now I file for divorce, I said. My lawyer is drawing up the papers. You'll be served next week. His head snapped up. You already talked to a lawyer? When were you going to tell me? I just did, I replied calmly. The house goes on the market. We split everything 50-50, minus what I've contributed more to over the years, which my lawyer assures me is substantial. You can have the furniture, most of it anyway. I don't want reminders. But Daniel, listen to me very carefully. You don't get to control this narrative anymore. If people ask me what happened, I'm telling them the truth. All of it. His face hardened. You're going to trash me to everyone we know? I'm going to be honest, I corrected. There's a difference. You're the one who chose to post cryptic messages about your journey and surround yourself with people who only heard your version. I'm just evening the playing field. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping. This is revenge. This is you trying to hurt me because you're hurt. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe it's just me finally standing up for myself. Either way, it doesn't change what happens next. We're done, Daniel. Really, truly done. I waited for him to argue, to plead, to try one more manipulation tactic. Instead, he just stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Fine, he said finally. Have it your way. He turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me sitting alone in the booth. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of fighting, tired of hurting, tired of being the one who had to be strong. I pulled out my phone and texted Vanessa. It's done. Her reply was immediate. I'm proud of you. Come over tonight. I'm making dinner. As I left the coffee shop and stepped into the afternoon sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not happiness, not yet, but something close. Relief. The confrontation I'd been dreading was over, and I'd said everything I needed to say. Whatever came next, at least I'd face it knowing I hadn't stayed silent. That evening at Vanessa's apartment, I collapsed onto her couch with a glass of wine and finally let myself cry. Not for Daniel, not for the marriage, but for the version of myself who'd believed in forever. Who'd trusted blindly. Who'd thought love was enough. Vanessa sat beside me, not trying to fix it, just being there. When the tears finally stopped, she handed me a tissue and said, You know what this means, right? What? I asked. It means you survived. You survived the worst thing you thought could happen, and you're still here. You're still you. And that Daniel, he's the one who has to live with what he did. Not you. Her words settled over me like a blanket. She was right. Whatever Daniel's journey looked like from here, it wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own journey to worry about, my own healing to do. And for the first time since that midnight text, I felt ready to start. 3 months later, I stood in my new apartment, boxes still half unpacked, morning light streaming through windows that overlooked a park I'd already started jogging through every weekend. The divorce papers had been signed 2 weeks ago. Daniel had fought me on a few things, the division of our savings account, who got the nice coffee maker, but eventually his lawyer had convinced him that dragging it out would only cost him more. The house sold faster than expected. I'd walked through it one last time before closing, room by room, saying goodbye to the life I'd built there. It hurt less than I thought it would. I'd blocked Daniel on everything after the papers were signed. No more texts. No more carefully curated social media posts about his transformation. No more mutual friends reporting back on what he was up to. Vanessa had warned me that cutting all ties would be hard, but it turned out to be the easiest decision I'd made. Without his voice in my ear, without his presence in my notifications, I could finally hear my own thoughts clearly. I started therapy. Real therapy, not the couples counseling Daniel had suggested as a band-aid. My therapist, Dr. Reeves, helped me see patterns I'd been ignoring for years. How I'd made myself smaller to make Daniel comfortable. How I'd excused behavior I should have confronted. How I'd confused peacekeeping with love. One afternoon, scrolling through my phone, I saw that Bethany had tagged me in a memory from 2 years ago. A group photo from someone's birthday party, Daniel and me in the center, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing. I looked at that photo for a long time, studying the woman I used to be. She looked happy. She had no idea what was coming. Part of me wanted to warn her, but another part of me understood that she needed to go through it all to become who I was now. I untagged myself and kept scrolling. Last week, I ran into Monica, Daniel's sister, at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable, trapped between the produce section and the dairy aisle with nowhere to hide. "Elena," she said carefully. "How are you?" "I'm good," I replied honestly. "Really good." She nodded, relief crossing her face. "I'm glad. For what it's worth, I think Daniel knows he messed up. He's been different lately. Quieter." I didn't ask for details. Whatever Daniel was going through wasn't my concern anymore. "I hope he figures things out," I said, and I meant it. Not for his sake, but for mine. Holding on to anger would only poison the peace I'd worked so hard to build. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the city. My phone was inside, silenced, forgotten. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It felt like freedom. I thought about that midnight text, the one that had shattered my world. "I'm not in love with you anymore." At the time, those words had felt like an ending, like everything I'd built had crumbled in an instant. But sitting there, in my own space, living my own life, I realized they'd actually been a gift. Daniel had set me free. He just hadn't meant to. I raised my glass to the sunset, to the journey, to the woman I'd become. "Thanks for the update," I whispered to the wind, smiling. "Because you were right about one thing, Daniel. This wasn't working. Not for you, but definitely not for me either." And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely, entirely, beautifully whole. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.